Hello, my name is Cole Manus. This is my future scanning project on engineering with a focus on marine transportation. During the presentation on marine transportation, one will learn about the history of sea travel, how the materials have changed, how propulsion has changed, as well as modifications to the hull type, and lastly, we'll look over new technology. Rafts have been around for over 800,000 years in Egypt, being made from reeds that grow on the riverbank that have hollow pockets of air. Once bound together enough, they resemble a boat or a raft that can hold the human weight, much like this picture on the right. While in 50 BC on the River Rhine, it was said that multiple boats were hauling cargo, showing the importance of their transportation use. In North Australia, in 1640, people began to make dugout canoes. They did so by burning logs and hollowing out these embers. This made a more buoyant and hydrodynamic boat for transportation purposes. In 1450, wooden boats with multiple masts began to haul merchandise and other goods across the ocean. This was the beginning of boats being used for the mass cargo transportation. Since 1990, global usage of marine transportation has steadily been increasing, where nowadays about 80% of global merchandise is transported via sea vessel. The vessel below the text is a famous vessel shown in the Captain Phillips movie. This is a famous vessel because it was attacked by pirates, because it was not very heavily armed, and as mentioned before, 80% of global merchandise is used and transported across these cargo ships. While our chart on the right shows billions of tons of deadweight from 1980 to 2010, with an extreme spike of exponential weight from 2002 to 2010. So now we're going to be going over some of the materials that were used for boat building. With wood being experimented with for boat building purposes around 8,600 and 7,500 BC, most likely looking like rafts or dugout canoes, much like the ones of the Northern Australians. It wasn't until 1000 AD that we had significant evidence of Vikings making long ships out of individually pieced together wood. These long ships were typically manned by about 60 men, and they would row. If rowing is not an option, they would use a center mast in the middle of the boat. The first trees that were used were the Pinus sylvestris, while it was later found that cedar, ash, and cypress worked best due to their straight grain and rot resistance. The boats on the left would be resembling wooden dugout canoes. Wooden dugout canoes, as said before, were started with fire on top of the log. As the fire hollows out the wood, embers would be scooped out with most or a bone axe made from a deer's shoulder blade. The boat on the right is a Viking longboat. As you can see, many of these pieces of wood were soaked in water and bent to fit the shape of the boat that they needed. As 60 men would sit on the side with oars coming through the holes near the gunnels, and if need be, there was a mast in the center. Metal hulls, such as iron, began to come about in 1830 for military use and protection. This was thanks to John Birkenhead, for he wanted these warships to protect the East India Company. While it wasn't until 1945 that the first aluminum boat was made by Mr. Henry Niels, who later went on to found the Alumacraft Company. The boat seen in the picture is the U.S. Banshee, which is another early iron hull boat powered by steam. Fiberglass came about 3 years before the aluminum boat, which is widely seen as the most common material used for boat making now. The added benefit being that fiberglass starts off as a soft, cotton-like patch of cloth. This is fitted to any mold that is liked, and then a resin is poured over the top, which then hardens and solidifies it like plastic. In the bottom left is an old shrimp boat that my grandfather had had. You can see that fiberglass can be polished and colored any paint and made look much like a metal. While on the right, you can see a man laying down pre-dipped pads of fiberglass into slats of a boat hull. This metal boat is what we were talking about earlier. This is what was made to protect the East India Company. It is named the gunship Nemesis. The gunship Nemesis was powered by steam, but also wind transportation as seen by its masts. Sail-powered boats were invented more than 7,000 years ago, while the age of sail was 15,000 to 18,100. The first steamboat entered in 1787, yet it wasn't until years later that it began to become popular. In the lower right-hand corner, you can see a steamboat, much like the first one that would have been invented by John Fitch. John Fitch was able to make the steamboat due to Robert Fulton making the steam engine, often considered the father of steam. The first two-stroke engine wasn't made until the 1880s by a man named Joseph Day. This engine was listed under Home Light, 55 horsepower. Home Light is no longer a recognizable brand. It was not until 1962 that the first four-stroke engine was made. The four-stroke engine outdated the two-stroke engine, as most companies nowadays do not sell two-stroke, nor do they work on two-stroke, due to the difficulty, the weight, and the maintenance needed. Two-stroke engines have mixed gas, while four-stroke engines typically have an oil basin, much like a car. It wasn't until the late 70s that the jet ski was invented. This jet ski jet engine was then turned into an outboard, much like the one seen below, and is now used by police departments and fire departments on rivers and lakes, where there is many debris where they cannot risk breaking a prop on the way to an emergency. The deep V hull boat came around 1958, invented by Mr. Ray Hunt. These boats are typically fishing boats which allow you to get out offshore quickly, safely, and comfortably. The deep V cuts through the water in waves, allowing quick and easy transportation. The catamaran came as early as the 5th century, originating in India with the original Indian words translated to two trees tied together. As you can see in the bottom right of our illustration, we have a catamaran hull with two separate hulls. These are great because it allows waves to break underneath. A flat-bottom boat was designed in 1781, as you can see in the top of our illustration. This allows the maximum amount of weight capacity and also the minimum amount of water draft. While the famous Carolina flare boat came around in World War II, made famous for its 24-inch dead rise, allowing water to be splashed away from the boat, keeping the cabin and the crew dry. While nuclear-powered icebreakers were even around by 1975. This is a deep V-styled boat. This is a center console C Pro powered by a Suzuki outboard engine. You can see how the front of the boat has a sharp keel, which would help cut through the water and lift the bow out. This is a catamaran. As you can also see, there's two separate holes to disperse the weight and allow waves to break underneath the boat, keeping it horizontally level. Catamarans are typically also only powered by wind, yet they also will have a gasoline backup engine in case it's not a windy day. Here in the top right, we can see a trash barge or a construction barge. This is a flat-bottom styled boat, which allows maximum weight. And in the bottom, we can see what would be an alumacraft, much like Mr. Henry Nielsen made, or what y'all may call a John boat. Typically, these would be in the backyards by ponds, and many of you may have even fished with your grandfather. Our top left, we have a Carolina Skip with a Suzuki 115. This is a very typical fishing boat as it allows you to drive in 6 to 8 inches of water and sight fish. Here we have a Carolina flare boat. As you can see, the 24-inch dead rise that turns almost parallel to the water. This allows all water to be splashed away from the boat, keeping it very dry. Here we have a nuclear icebreaker, the U.S. Coast Guard boat, whose name does exactly what it intends. It breaks the ice so other boats can get through. This being a marvel, considering 63 years beforehand, the Titanic sank doing the exact same thing that this boat does every single day. So now we're going to be talking about some of these new technologies. First being the hydrofoil boat. The first hydrofoil boat patent was for a rowboat in France in 1869 to just help take some of the ease off of paddling. As a hydrofoil works much like an air wing on an airplane, as the boat gets speed, it gains lift through the dense water, raising the hull and the bow out of the water, increasing the propulsion maxability. The spot-lock trolling motor is a new iteration of trolling motor that allows you to connect to satellites that keep you in one spot within a 5-foot radius circle. This outphased the chain and anchor to hold you in one spot. As the first spot-lock trolling motor came about by the company now many other companies such as Logan use this spot-lock. Spot-lock is but many of large solutions. In the top right, you can see what is considered a helm master, or otherwise known as a joystick. The joystick was made by Volto Penta. Volto Penta made this joystick to help clear some of the head clutter that was made when using multiple outboard engines. When you have multiple outboard engines and you're trying to dock, one must toggle between both and turn the wheel opposite directions twice in order to do what is called crab walking into a dock space. Well, the joystick takes all of the guessing work and the brain work out and allows you to move on a horizontal platform. The bow thrusters is much like the helm master and the joystick, but this is mostly on bigger ships, while the joystick is mostly on a center console. Bow thrusters allow you to maneuver in tight docking situations. Electrical outboards are being experimented with by big name manufacturers, such as Mercury. Mercury came out with last year an all-electric outboard engine called the Mercury Avatar. Well, you can also see a tried and true company, Elco, who's been around for quite a while making electronic outboards. While electronic outboards are becoming more popular due to the fact that they have zero emissions, and there's some lakes around here, such as Lake Raleigh and Crystal Lake, and most homeowner association lakes, that only allow electronic outboards controlling them. E-propulsion is on the top of the electronic outboard game, considering they have the longest battery life, and battery life being the main advancements in electronic outboards. Propane gas is also becoming a more realistic fuel source as the miles per pounds of gas is becoming more. As you can see, a Lear outboard on the right is powered by either a 20-pound gas stove propane, or it'd be powered by a camping 5-pound propane. There's other companies such as Mercury that we talked about previously that offer propane. And these typically are going to give you about 25% less emissions while running you about $300 to $400 more for the same HP. Here are some of our resources used for our presentation. I thank you for following me with my presentation, and I hope you learned something. Thank you.